today I'm going to speak on the subject of legal reforms in electoral governance in India. Now, I would be covering both the practical experiences that I've had in the Election Commission of India, where I served for 6 years, and also on the main topic of what kind of reforms have been done uh, from legal point of view over the last many years, ever since the election process started in India. Uh, Friends, I would divide my talk. Uh, in fact, I've been given a total of 1 hour to speak today. I would use about 45 to 50 minutes to take you through this journey. And then maybe I'll leave about 10 minutes or so for the question answer session. Now, the questions, as I was told, could be asked after I finish my talk, or it could also be given on the chat box and whatever mode you follow. So I would divide my topic into 3 or 5, subtopics. First is something about the electoral governance. What exactly do we mean by electoral governance, and especially with regard to India? Number one. Number two, what were the constitutional and legislative reforms which have been made over the period of years in order to make the elections in India and election management to have all the electoral integrity. Uh, there have also been judicial judgments and reforms with regard to because of the landmark judgments given by the Honorable Supreme Court. Then there are also technological and administrative innovations, behind which again there are legal aspects, because for some technological and administrative changes and reforms, the laws had to be changed or tweaked. So, starting with the electoral governance, friends, electoral governance by and large, it refers to the legal, the institutional and procedural framework governing how elections are conducted in India, and it covers the electoral laws. I would talk about the electoral laws which are used in the entire election process and the election management. Then, other than law, we have the independent body of Election Commission of India, about which you are quite aware, and it's a constitutional authority. And the best part, friends, about the Election Commission of India is that it was constituted in on 25th January 1950, a day before India became republic. Now that shows how our forefathers and how the our leaders had thought about that. How can there be a democracy? How can there be a republic without without the election machinery? So we had 1 day before the Election Commission of India was brought into existence. Then whatever judicial decisions have been taken, they have also, I would say, purified the electoral process. It has made lots of major reforms, and you would come to know gradually as I come to it. And then I talked about the technology itself has brought a lot of things, which in terms of reforms. At this moment, I will just mention and bring to your notice the unique machinery of elections, the EVMs, electronic voting machine. Now they are the wonder machines of India. In fact, they are nowhere in the world you will find a system, where in the largest democracy, the elections are conducted, in such a fair and free manner, and the results are counted within few hours. So these are some of the aspects of electoral governance. And of course, as I always say, that the better is the electoral integrity of a nation, of the election system, the stronger will be the democracy, because ultimately it is the democracy is dependent upon the powers of the people, and the powers of the people should come rightly with a level playing field. Now, in Indian context, if I see, free and fair elections have been the hallmark of Indian democracy. And Article 324 of Indian Constitution has been extremely helpful to give these powers to the Election Commission and to the system in order to conduct fair and free elections. Friends, the election reforms would also mean lots of other things. Political accountability. It also means transparency. It also means inclusivity. And as I had earlier mentioned, it also means that the electoral process should have the desired integrity. Now, Indian elections, friends, I would say is a model of electoral governance throughout the world. And let me tell you, with all my experience, people are in awe when they hear about the largeness of Indian elections and the way, the way it is conducted. Every 5 years, the general elections, and in fact, we have elections all through those 5 years in various state assemblies and Rajya Sabha and presidential elections and all. Now, such a big democracy, and the power transfers are done so smoothly. Now, this is all. These are the strengths of. Now, how? What do you mean by electoral integrity? Now, it means lots of things. In terms of India, if you see the challenges, as I had mentioned, it's world's largest democracy, both in size and as well as magnitude of electorate. And we are taking democracy to the remotest. We have on one hand Northeast, we have Himalayas, we have people staying in different places, very remote areas, and yet we have polling stations there. Now, imagine, it's very interesting to know, from my experience, there was, now it is no longer, there was a polling station, deep inside Gir forest in Gujarat, where a polling party of 4 to 5 people, which is the normal constitution of a polling party in India, it used to travel all the way to a polling station on the poll day. Guess for how many people? Just one person who stayed in that particular deep forest. Now, Indian democracy, this is a very live example of Indian democracy, that even if there is one person and there is a polling station, the polling party goes there to get his election, to get his vote. Now, this is the taking democracy to the remotest. We are dealing with diversities, friends. Religion, religious, regional, ethnic, cultural, linguistic. With all these diverse, kind of diversities, we are conducting elections, in a very effective manner. We have multiple political parties, and yet we maintain the highest standard of electoral integrity. Friends, electoral integrity also means that there should be some rule of law. And you people, most of you must be law students. Now, rule of law is so important for normal governance and for elections all the more. So, coming to the point of the electoral laws, we are in India, election management is governed by, number one, as I had mentioned, Indian Constitution. And when I talk of Indian Constitution, you refer to Article 324, 325, 6, 7, 8, and 329. I'm not going to deal with all these sections, but Article 324 is the mother of all all articles, and it provides lots of powers to the Election Commission and to the system, as I said, to conduct fair and free elections. The second aspect of law, electoral laws, is the statutory acts. So, Representation of People's Act 1950, Representation of People's Act 1951, Conduct of Election Rules 1961, and Registration of Electors Rules 1960. Now, these are the four statutory acts and rules, on the basis of which the election process is also undertaken. Many people may be wondering that when the nominations happen, that you give 7 days for nomination, then 1 day for and 2 days for withdrawal, then minimum 40 days for campaigning and all. Now, who decides this? Everything is given in the Act and rules. And friends, last but not the least, Election Commission of India has been, by virtue of Article 324, and by virtue of the powers given in these statutory acts and the rules, the Election Commission conducts the elections, and maintains the electoral integrity. Now, I'll be very short here because this is basically to introduce all of you to the aspects of electoral governance and how India is a major player, or I should say, the leading kind of countries as far as elections are concerned. So, friends, election machinery is also important, and so we have the Election Commission of India as an independent body. Electoral roll is important, for which, as I had mentioned, we have the Representation of People's Act, and we have the registration of electors' rules. Now, everything is prescribed. Similarly, poll management, the poll process, election process, we have this RP Act 1950. Now, these are all adhered to, in the most legal manner. Safety and security of voters, polling teams, and candidates. Now, this is very important to see that everything is fair and everything is free. If the voters are under intimidation, it is not likely that the elections will be free. If the polling party are under pressure, then obviously you cannot say that it will result in a very fair elections. So we have to protect all these stakeholders, or maybe the players of election process, in order to have good, fair and free elections. Elections also have to be done in peaceful manner. And so, friends, this is basically to ensure voter participation and credibility. If there is no peace, there will not be proper participation. And if there is no proper participation, there will be elements who would try to intimidate voters and get votes in their favor. Now, this is another. Now, how election commission is taking care of all these, it is a matter of election management. But I'm just trying to, bring before you as to why we consider ourselves, as a leader in electoral governance, and what kind of reforms have actually happened, and which has resulted in this kind of electoral integrity. Friends, we also have the system of observers, senior IS officers, senior administrative officers, associated observers. Now, there is a legal provision again in the Act to provide for observers, and basically they are the eyes and the ears. Now, this again is to ensure transparency in the election process. There is a model code of conduct. Now, model code of conduct is not a law, but it is more effective than a law. Many times there has been, a debate, I would say, even when I was in the election commission, there was a thought people used to say, oh, why don't we convert this model code of conduct into law? So it is basically a code of ethics. It is a code. And who has brought this model code? The political parties. Now, the political parties themselves sat and designed and defined these model code of conduct in order to follow them. Now, always remember, you are a law student. The the effectiveness of law doesn't depend on good legislation alone. The effectiveness of law depends also on how implementable it is, how people would follow it. That is the real success. And you have seen, I don't want to give any examples of such laws which have failed to be, followed by people, and then you have all kinds of administrative checks and balances. Now, in model code of conduct, at least this aspect is covered, that the political parties themselves have agreed to a particular code of conduct and they follow it. And the good thing is that within the limited process time, which is about 30 to 35 to 40 days, the law is a long process. So if you file an FIR during that particular process for any act like bribery or maybe some kind of pressure or intimidation, now it will take years together, with the result that solution is not done right there within those 30, 35 days. In model code of conduct, the moment you find that somebody, either the candidate has done or the party has violated the model code, election commission is absolutely prompt in taking action. And that action is known to the people also. And that creates the effect, the right effect, which law may not create, because people come to know, yes, there has been a judgment on this particular violation of model code. And so the candidate or the party was wrong in this. And so they form an opinion about the candidate or the party before they vote. Now, this is how, then friends, peace and muscle power. See, there was a time when there were many incidents, I would not mention that era, but even at times today, the muscle power was used, in getting, in influencing the elections. Now, that also has been taken care of by the Election Commission to a very, very large extent, thanks to, again, Article 324, which says that the entire government machinery, election machinery, will be made available to the Election Commission at the time of elections. Now, that means Election Commission itself does not have any big machinery, of its own. The entire machinery is taken from the states for the state elections, as well as the central elections, and also from Government of India. Now, the way they are trained, the way they have been brought up, they have been, I would say, told about how important the elections are. And the Election Commission of India has been given enormous powers to take disciplinary action against any such person in the election machinery who has not done the way it should be done, as per the law. Another thing which has been reformatory, as I touched upon initially, is the technology. Now, technology, again, I mean, it has brought transparency, it has brought credibility, it has brought accountability. And the way technology has been used in elections, I will give you examples. I've already given an example of EVM. Now, how it has brought, the reforms in the election process. I will, when I touch upon certain aspects of technological innovations in the election process. And finally, on the electoral integrity part, friends, I would like to touch upon the provision for electoral justice. Whenever there is anything uh, with regard to a process in any country, you have to have a system of electoral justice. So India also, we have the election justice. But as I had referred earlier to you, Article 329. Now, knowing fully well that election process is the foundation stone, or elections are the cornerstone of any democracy. That process should not come to a halt. That should not come to a pause even. Once it has started, it should come to an end. And so Article 329 has given these powers that no court can interfere. No court can interfere in the election process unless they are completed. Now, this applies to, the seats, as decided by the delimitation commission and everything. It's only after the results are declared in an elections that the system of election petitions start. And this is what Article 329 says. So we have the provision of election petitions. So any person who has grievance about the electoral process, the results and counting, whatever, they can go to the high courts for election petition, and we have court for appeals and interpretation of constitutional provisions. So, friends, this is how Indian elections have become the gold standard in this country. Now, coming to the historical background of the reforms. So, I would say that in 1950s and 1980s, more emphasis was on foundation of electoral laws. Representation of People's Act came, and conduct of elections rules and all everything came. Now, if I say that most of the reforms have come post 90s, and there have been many reasons. Now, I would recall some of the reasons why these reforms, because reforms happen only when there is an issue. Uh, Technology apart, but most of the reforms which have happened, for example, the rise in criminalization in politics, then the corruption, then the technological evolution, then misuse of money power, misuse of muscle power, which I referred to, then to bring speed to the election process, to bring credibility, to bring greater transparency, to get a level playing field, to bring more inclusivity, for ease of voter registration, to become a voter, that also has been changed and reformed. Ease of voting. For example, for old people today, 85 years old, plus old, the Election Commission has made a very unique provision that they can vote from their homes under the same vote secrecy of vote. I'm not going into the detail, but I'm just giving you an instance. Then prevention of bogus votings. Then vitiation of votes, booth capturing, poll violence, ease of election process, voter awareness, saving of money. So, friends, there have been many, for every reform there have been reasons, and I've seen them working in the Election Commission. Then whenever things. For example, I'll give you a very live example, and you people must have heard from time to time. There was a time, sometime in 2009, when I was in the Election Commission, there were a lot of issues raised about the Indian electronic voting machines. That it's hackable and it is not reliable, it is not credible, and something wrong can happen. Technology, it's connected with internet and all. Now, it took a lot of years for the Election Commission, and they ultimately convinced one and all, because even if there is a doubt about anything which is part of the election process, it was thought by the Election Commission that we must allay those fears. And those fears were allayed ultimately by bringing a system called VVPAT, which is basically a verifiable trail, paper trail. Today, when you go to elections, friends, you may have gone to cast your vote during 2024 elections also, and in your state also. You must have found that when you press the EVM button, there is a machine which is next to the ballot unit, and there is something which comes out like a piece of paper on the screen, and you can watch for 6-7 seconds, and then it goes down. Now, this is the VVPAT. Now, primarily, this is only to bring credibility, that whoever you have voted for, you can see his or her name, the poll symbol, and whatever. So that is convincing. Now, this is how the credibility thing has happened. Now, coming to the first part, as I had mentioned, that what are the constitutional and legislative reforms. And that means the parliament has made certain constitutional amendments in order to bring these reforms, and there have been such some legislative reforms to bring changes in the act also, which I've mentioned, RP Act and rules, which I referred to earlier. Now, one very landmark constitutional amendment was 61st Constitutional Amendment in 1988. This was when the voting age was reduced from 21 to 18 years. Now, this was basically to bring youth participation. This was basically to bring inclusivity. And you could say that the political thinkers thought that India's electorate has turned mature. There was a time when we had adult suffrage right in the beginning. Now, when adult suffrage came, which is part of the constitution, mind you, one article is there for this. That means everyone can cast vote. There were lots of issues all over the world that, oh, how can you give rights to everyone? But India followed that, and that is why I'm using the word mature. So when the age was reduced, it was thought that Indian youth has become matured, and even an 18-year-old can think about as to who is the best person for the country and for running the government. So this was one amendment. Then Delimitation Act. I'm only touching upon the main reforms which have really changed the course, and have brought about major reforms. Now, in the Delimitation Act of 2002, now delimitation basically, friends, is to delimit the constituency, to carve out the constituency areas. What will be an assembly segment, what will be the parliament constituency and legislative assembly constituency, and on the paper, on the map, as to what areas will come in a particular constituency. Now, this is done after every few years, and this is primarily to ensure a fair representation after census. So delimitation commission is constituted for this, which is a quasi-judicial body. So that act was also brought. I would now refer to the another very major constitutional amendment, 91st Constitutional Amendment, brought about in 2003 or so. Now, it amended certain articles, and it capped the size of Council of Ministers. Now, maximum 15% of the House strength can be the ministers. Caps. Total strength of the ministers could be 15% of the total strength of. If Lok Sabha has got 543 members, then sitting members, then 15% of that. Similarly, assemblies have different number of seats. Now, there was also a move and a very landmark amendment for anti-defection framework. So defection used to be, a very common kind of activity, and in the election process, that some party may, or maybe some members who are getting elected, they defect to another party and then form government. Now, with anti-defection law, there are certain provisions which would certainly, not prevent, but there are certain more stringent conditions which the movement of can be done. Now, another very major amendment was the Representation of People Act amendment. This was basically with regard to the disqualification, with regard to nomination and expenditure management and publication of results. Another very landmark judgment, about which I think all of you must have also read, about the electoral bond scheme of 2017. Now, earlier, there were these electoral bonds which was brought about in the year 2017, and later on, the Supreme Court, it struck down in the year 2024 as unconstitutional. Now, these are some of the major constitutional reforms. However, there have also been landmark judgments, friends, which have changed the course and have brought about a lot of reforms. I would name some of them and then see how they have brought about the change. One is Union of India versus Association for Democratic Reforms, ADR. You must have heard of ADR very often. They are some kind of NGO who are working, in this particular field. Now, one very major thing that was brought about by the Supreme Court judgment was right to know the candidate. Now, what does it mean? It mandated the candidates by the court to disclose all the criminal cases that they have, the assets and liabilities, their educational qualifications in an affidavit, which they are supposed to file along with the nomination process, the nomination paper. Now, today, the idea was of bringing out this the judgment was that,
the voters should know what kind of criminal background the candidate whom you are going to vote has, and what are his total property, assets, liabilities, assets, and how much it was earlier. So people can compare how much assets a particular candidate had earlier and now. So they can decide. And they have to file an affidavit because they cannot tell something which is not correct. Another thing, another judgment was, friends, People's Union for Civil Liberties, PUCL versus Union of India. This was 2013. And it brought about a very unique provision, nota, none of the above. Now, that none of the above option on EVMs, it means that if you go to a polling station and you do not like to vote cast your vote on any person, you can put it on the nota also. That means I have not liked anyone and none of the above. I'm not casting vote on any of them and it is none of the above. Now, that means that some people may come out of the polling stations, by pressing none of the above. Now, one reform that was not done, or it has not been done under that particular provision, is that if nota scores most, if nota is the winner, then there is no impact of that, irrespective of the fact as to how many votes are cast on nota. It doesn't create any impact because it doesn't mean that the elections will be, redone, or maybe if nota wins. So that is thing, but still, it has kind of, it's a step towards a reform. Lily Thomas versus Union of India. Now this is also a very landmark judgment, 2013, and what it did was it kind of address the issue of criminality, in politics. And there was a section 88.4, 8 subsection 4 of the RP Act 1951. It was struck down, which means that any person who has been elected can be disqualified immediately upon conviction. And the conviction, is for 2 years or more than 2 years, and there are certain conditions. Now, this was a major step toward criminalization of politics. Another very landmark judgment is Public Interest Foundation versus Union of India. Now, just like the candidates would bring about their assets and liabilities and criminal antecedents, similarly, this landmark judgment directed political parties to publicize the criminal antecedents of candidates, because they are the people. The political parties give the ticket to the candidates, and so they are supposed to publicize the criminal antecedents also and put it on the public domain. And they have to also explain why they were chosen. And this is primarily to reinforce the transparency and the voter awareness. And again, the same point, that right to know of the people. Then Subramaniam Swamy versus Election Commission of India in 2013 to 19 era. And that was the time when EVM, to VVPAT, EVM accompanied with VVPAT was brought about. And it was the Honorable Supreme Court judgment which directed that a voter verifiable paper audit trail, this is the full form of VVPAT, should be introduced gradually in the election process. And finally, friends, in the 2019 elections, all the polling stations in the general elections, they had EVM with VVPAT. So basically, it affirmed the integrity of the electronic voting machines. Uh, then electoral bond, I have already referred to you, and the Supreme Court struck it down. Basically, it was a landmark reaffirmation of transparency as a democratic value and to ensure level playing field. Now, when I say level playing field, it means that in our process, uh, all parties are alike. There should not be any discrimination between the rights of party A or party B. And normally, as I had mentioned earlier about the model code of conduct also, now model code of conduct is also primarily to ensure that the ruling party, because let's not forget, whenever the elections happen, there is some ruling party ruling, the government is there, and it has a ruling party, and they are also in the election fray. Now, in order to see that they don't get any extra benefit, of being in power, this model code of conduct is extremely effective. And I can say with a lot of assurance to you, and with a lot of authority, being in the election commission for long, long years, I can say that the whole election machinery, the Election Commission of India, they try to ensure that a level playing field is restored in all aspects, and there is no particular kind of advantage to any person or any party in particular. I would now go on to the technological and administrative innovations. Now, I start with electronic voting machines. Now, friends, this was also done uh, by way of the amendment in the Representation of People Act 19 in 1988. Now, what had happened is, earlier, as you know, in the earlier act, it was ballot box, ballot papers, and one would, like of stamp. And then when counting also happened, every ballot paper was to be counted. Now, when EVMs were brought, obviously they were not brought in all the constituencies together. So, but the amendment was made that EVMs can also, be used, and gradually the number of EVMs or the number of constituencies using EVM increased with every election, general elections. And one day, as I said, in 2004, probably the first time that EVMs were fully used, and like I had mentioned, 2019, VVPAT and EVM combinedly, they were used. Now, I don't want to go into too many aspects of the advantages of EVM, but you know very, very well. You have also been a voter. So the first very big benefit is that it ensures faster counting. Now, I was district magistrate in many districts, and we had elections, and returning officers, district magistrates, collectors are generally the returning officer of parliamentary constituencies. I remember one such elections when I was a collector. The counting started at 8 a.m. on day one, and it ended on at about 12 noon on day two. With the whole night, the counting happened. Now, you can imagine how taxing it is from all angles. Now, today, the counting starts at 8 o'clock. And in smaller constituencies, in assembly constituencies, by 3 o'clock, it is over. And the results are declared, and the certificates are handed over to the winning candidates. And maximum by 6 or 7. By the time the everything is compiled and results are aired, by evening, you can find that the entire results have come, which never happened earlier. Now, not just that, in earlier days, when ballot papers were used, I was a witness. I was also subdivision magistrate who was actually sitting on the counting table and taking out the ballot papers. Now, what happens is many a time, between the two candidates, there used to be stamping. Now, some people, instead of stamping clearly on particular candidate in the block, they would do it midway. Half is that side, half is so half seal is there, half seal is there. And then it was the job of the SDM and the other counting officers. They would separate. No, no, this is invalid. This is valid. This is invalid. This is valid. Now that thing is over. There is nothing like invalid vote in EVM. And the third is when you recount. There are times when somebody is not happy with the result. The number two winner or maybe the loser, runner up, I would say, he would ask the returning officer, "Ki, please recount." Now, earlier recount, and they have the right to get it recounted. So earlier, the recount was primarily, to by recounting every ballot paper once again, all lakhs of votes, again. That means, suppose if there is a constituency, and as I had mentioned, one constituency where 1.5 days it carried on. And suppose the returning officer is compelled to do the recounting of the entire constituency. It would take another 1.5 days to recount. Now what happens is recounting would mean you just put the result button, press the result buttons of 150, 120, 110, EVMs, and you get the results again. And results are never different because they are machines. They will display the same result, and the recounting is also done very fast. So I'm just mentioning all these aspects, and these are the big reforms in the electoral process, and even in terms of transparency and everything. The EVMs are opened in front of all the counting agents of the parties. So that is one. Another thing which has brought about a lot of reform is the EPIC, the Electoral Photo Identity Card. Now, I was talking of bogus voting. I was talking of impersonation. Now, Election Commission decided to issue its own EPIC card, identity card, and you have to bring that EPIC card. Now, EPIC card has been prepared by Election Commission with due care, and so they cannot be wrong. They have the photograph, they have everything, so people are identifiable. So when they go to the polling station, with a computerized voter roll, which was never. This is again a big reform. Earlier, the rolls used to be, printed. Now they are computerized. And today, I would talk about the Election Commission reforms. NVSP, the National Voter Service Portal, gives you, even you can visit this portal and see where your name is, whether your name is there or not. Earlier, you used to take days together to go to the electoral registration officer, make a request, sir, please tell us whether this is there or not. Another thing which had happened, so this epic cards have reduced the chances of impersonation and bogus voting. Another thing which has happened is the voter slip, ease of process. I mentioned about vote. Now, sometime when I was in the election commission, the commission started the process of issuing voter slips to the voters, which means if the elections are 3 days later, today the booth level officer would knock at your door and say, "Ki, sir, I have brought your voter slips." Now, these voter slips are just like, when you go to a cinema ticket, or you buy a air ticket, you have the proof that your name is there. Now, earlier people used to go stand in the queue only to find that your name is not there. Now today there is a proof, and that voter slip mentions, Mr. Vinod Zucchi, you would vote at such and such polling station on such and such day. The address is like this. Your serial number in the electoral roll is this, and so it is a license. 3 days before, you are sure that when you go there, and you can show that voter slip. Sir, it will save time. It saves time of the polling officer who is looking into your name in the voter list, which is about 10 to 15 pages. So it used to take a lot of time. The more time it used to take searching your name, the less time was there for people to vote. And so it is also helping, this voter slip is also helping in getting more and more voter participation, that within those 8 to 9 hours, the percentage of polls is likely to increase because the time is limited. So this is another reform which has happened. VVPAT system, I've already mentioned, it has reaffirmed the transparency of and the verifiability of the electronic voting machine. Then the online registration and real-time voter, as I mentioned, if you see the NVSP, you will find your own voter, and also your Epic card has a unique number. Now that is used for identification in many areas today. If you want to be identified, you can get identified by voter roll. You need not produce a Aadhaar all the time, and it has a unique number. If that number you feed in the NVSP portal, you will find all the details about your voter list and everything. Now, another thing which has happened is inclusion measures. Now, these service voters are provided postal ballots, friends. Now, service voters are those who are either working in the election process, or they are, deployed in far-flung areas like defense forces. So, which means that they are supposed to, they have the right to cast their vote to the postal ballot. They can send by post, and those ballots are counted. Now, they are actually ballot papers. They are not EVMs. EVMs are not taken to these places. They are ballot papers. And similarly, lakhs and lakhs of people who work in the election machinery on the poll day, It is difficult for me to cast my vote when I'm working, I'm on duty in the election process, the police people, everyone. So they are also allowed to give postal ballots in a different manner. So this is another area to include to see that nobody is left out. Another very big landmark reform was that the non-resident Indians, they if they have the name on the rolls, if they can register themselves in the place of residence in India, even if they are staying in elsewhere in the country. So if they have their names, they can register their names. Earlier it was not. They can come and vote on the day of poll by coming from their country or whichever country they are to India to their respective polling stations. And since their name is there in the voter list, they can cast their votes. Now, friends, other small procedural reforms which we have seen and we have worked on personally also and with the election commission is the introduction of mock poll. Now I won't go into the details because the time is not with me, but mock poll basically means that half an hour before or 1 hour before the actual poll process starts, the the EVMs are tested before the polling agents who are present there of all the parties, and they are supposed to, they're asked to cast their votes and see the result. This is only to convince कि देखो सब ठीक है ना, machine ठीक है. So mock poll ka, the result that you get under the mock poll, if it is reliable, then of course they say कि yes, yes, we are convinced, let's go ahead. So after half an hour of this mock poll and the results are taken out, and then the polling starts. Now, this is the extent of, reform, or maybe you can say how to convince the people and how to bring credibility in the election process. Then there are randomization of poll percentage. Now, all these points which I'm mentioning, they have been brought about in some reform. And wherever the election commission does not find any such action which they want to take to bring about easing of process or maybe credibility of the process, that they rely on Article 324. Because Article 324 entrusts the responsibility on the election commission that, you have to conduct the elections very well. Now, how you would do it is your prerogative. You have all the things before you. Under Article 324, you have been given enormous powers. The machinery is there. So, in that case, and the Commission mentions that we are using the powers of Article 324 of the Indian Constitution to bring about this change. So, I was talking about randomization of purpose. If I am a polling party person, I will never be posted for duty on this in the same constituency where I reside or where I work. So I will have to go to another constituency because I would know the people around and they can put pressure on me when I go to the polling station for duty. Similarly, the electronic voting machines are also randomized. Nobody knows which number of voting machine EVM. EVMs have numbers which go to a particular polling station. Then we have the counting of paper slips. Now again, Honorable Supreme Court, some people went to Supreme Court and they said, "Ki sir, it's fine that voter verifiable trail we see when we go for the elections and we see it is coming on the screen and then going down. But it will be good if you count the paper slips also." Now, ultimately, I'm not going through the entire procedure, what happened, but what the Supreme Court said that some portion of paper slips sample should be counted, at the time of counting in order to tally with the number which is being shown by the EVM. So I'll just be very short and, if you have questions, you can ask for more details. Then Epic card, I have already mentioned, national service, voter service portal, I have mentioned. Then there's a voter helpline. There's a helpline 1950, which is the year of election commission's existence. So 1950, if somebody dials, you can get all the details, as a voter helpline. Then you have the GIS mapping is used these days. The latest, friends, I would like to touch upon is remote voting. Now, Commission taking 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 care of this aspect, that at the time of voting there are many people who are in transit, who are on the work to some other place. So unless you are at your own constituency, you will not be able to vote. So voting EVM is always in the polling station. So the commission thought of bringing a new technological kind of advanced machine called remote EVM. Now, that remote EVM, in short, would be that if somebody wants to vote from a different place, if I'm in Delhi and I on the whole day, I'm supposed to be in Bombay, so I will request my returning officer, to kindly allow me to vote from there. Now, what arrangements Election Commission will make in terms of EVM, remote EVM, is a different matter. I'm not going into the details, but this is the kind of easing of the process and providing more facility in order to see that nobody is left out, because today with 66% to 67% of voting in the general elections, friends, still one third of Indian voters, they don't come to vote. Now this is something which was always in mind of the election commission, and so they worked upon this remote event. Now that matter is in process, so let's hope that something will come up so that this gap of 33% of people not voting should also be bridged. Then we, I would like to also just briefly talk about what are the challenges we still have. I've talked about a lot of reforms which have made Indian elections a gold standard, which have put India as a leader. But at the same time, there is always a scope for improvement. Friends, in the election commission when I was there, and today also I am working with institution of election commission called India International Institute for Election Management, and I go for lectures there. So I'm in touch with, so immediate things that are that we have to think, and maybe the challenges where we need to bring reforms is, one is the misuse of money power. The next second is the criminalization of politics. It has been partly addressed, but still, the requirement is that this needs to be further. The menace of paid news. I won't go into the details. Then you have the misuse of social media. Now, this is the latest. The digital age, uh, the election commission has to catch up with kind of the misuses of the social media also, and the kind of accountability of the candidates and other people. And that's why, and another thing which is again a matter of reform as a challenge is that once the election petition is filed, it takes a lot of delay to finalize, for various reasons. So that also is one of the areas where we need to. Uh, uh, but I would also like to mention that post COVID, lots of changes have happened. I remember in Punjab elections, I was sent as an observer of the state in 2022, and earlier also in some elections. You know, COVID was still in its last stage. So the candidates and the political parties, they decided to campaign through the digital media only, and not go to the public meetings and all, in order to avoid these problems. So technology has been playing a very, very important role, and even the election commission has brought about lots of improvements in the technology and the process of elections, but without tinkering with, without violating the legal provisions. So whenever, even in the technology aspect, something has to be brought in, something has to be introduced by the election commission, they will have to bring an amendment in the statute or in the rule, whichever way. For example, if remote EVM comes into existence and it becomes operational, mind you, some amendment has to be done, in the act.